All right, we are back. This is a recap episode of the 2024 Hardrock 100, joined by friends and colleagues Leah Yingling and Brett Hornig. I wish we were recording a couple minutes ago because we were just talking about the merits of a place that I want to see come to Salt Lake called Erewhon. I don't know if people in the audience know Erewhon, but apparently it is nowhere spelled backwards, and it's this like boutique grocery store. Leah and Brett had strong feelings. What do you like, Brett? What do you think? Is it worth it? Not worth it?
Well, I mean, it's clearly worth it to people who are willing to sip the Erewhon Kool-Aid. I've never been to one personally. Finn, would you seriously ever actually go in there and buy something?
That's what I want to know. Finn and Jules, they have
You go to
envelopes that
McDonald's.
they cash out their money into. So Finn shops with like dollar bills inside of an envelope, and that is his shopping money. So I would love to see Finn go to Erewhon with his envelope of $10 to go shopping, because I don't think it would happen.
Finn, you get a food allowance?
One of my crosses to bear in life is that I blow a lot of money on food. Like prior to Jules coming into my life, I had an addiction to the Whole Foods hot bar and would go pretty much every day. I lived like 2 feet away from it in downtown Salt Lake for a year. I do have a food allowance now. I'm on a very strict budget, and it's one of the things that we've had to reconcile in our marriage to date. Yeah, if it wasn't for Jules, I'd still be blowing money, and if it was Erewhon, I'd be even in like a bigger hole. So come to Salt Lake, but maybe don't come to Salt Lake Erewhon.
or you'd be eating like once every 3 days.
I know. This better be super nutrient dense.
You're like, ooh, it's Wednesday. I get to eat again. Nice.
But anyways, this is the Hardrock recap. We all consumed the event in different ways, which I think is going to make this episode interesting. We also got a lot of great listener questions, very diverse set. We reposted some of them on Instagram. Some of them we have here to discuss. I think in terms of topics, we've got what each of us did on the day, favorite moments, key takeaways, some winner podium analysis. But before that, I think it'd be fun to check in because it's been a bit. Leah, what's new in your life? What's up with you?
I am a little over 2 weeks post Western States. I've done 3 runs so far, 2 of those out in the San Juans this past weekend. So always hard to gauge where you're at post 100 miler when you're doing your runs between 10 and 13,000 feet. But feeling pretty good. I had my last day at my job last Monday, and I have a little 2-month hiatus between starting my next job. So currently fun employed for the next 2 months and brainstorming what to do with that time. So I'm in a good place.
Cool. How about you,
Summer
Brett?
Vacation. What have I been up to? I signed up for the Waldo 100K.
Ooh. Talk about that. That race is... We were talking about this a couple days ago. Sick race.
Yeah. So yeah, we've talked about Waldo a bunch, and just like how it's I feel like it's like one of the most iconic races that a lot of people have maybe heard about, but don't realize how many people have actually raced it. I mean, back in, I don't know, like the early 2000s, it seems like anyone who is, a Western States type contender would go and run Waldo in the summer. So it's like the top 10 on both the men's and women's side are just like legends. And it just seems like there's always a couple people that pop off Waldos every year. It's Craig Thornley's first race that he was the race director of prior to Western States. So yeah, and it's just a couple hours away from Ashland, and just a course I've always wanted to run. And this was the year where I have the opportunity to go and try it out. I mean, I'm definitely not running very much, so the biggest goal is to finish it and get a Western States qualifier and just like start getting my foot in that door again, because I only got 1 ticket, and I can't just like sitting around not throwing my 1 ticket into the pot forever. So yeah, I'm just excited to go and give that a try.
It reminds me, and maybe this is a long run archives topic, but what if we had a segment where it was like race like it's 2013, and you throw Waldo 100K in there, Me Walk, Zane Grey, Ice Age. Like if you could build a schedule of like what was popular then, and you did it in 2024, I think that'd be kind of a cool
I think
trip.
you would automatically get you, Roy, by winning all those races.
Oh, 100%. They'd just be like, What? He's also doing this and this. Yeah. Throw way too cool in there as well.
That would be a crazy experiment. If you did all those races, would you, and you were successful at them, would that put you pretty high up in Uroy?
I mean, I think we've talked about that before. Like, how many races do you have to do that aren't that competitive to get into the Uroy top 10?
You just have to play to the hand of the voters. And
Yeah.
I know we don't know too much about the voters, but I think we can make a lot of assumptions. And I think that schedule would fare pretty well with most of them.
Oh, yeah.
You know what's
100%.
crazy though is Jamil just bought Ultra Running Mag. This is breaking news, kind of. I think the press release came out earlier today, July 16th. But does the Uroy system change at all with new ownership of the mag?
That's a
Are we
great
about
question.
to become Uroy voters?
I hope so.
I would do it, actually. I think I'm to a point in my life where I'm no longer biased towards my own performances.
Okay.
Finn, don't you get a ballot?
I don't get a ballot. No,
Oh.
I am not a voter.
Darn it.
Probably because I would vote for Drew Holman, so that just discounts me.
Yeah, that's part of the application process. They're like, do you know Drew Holman? Have you talked to him? And you're just like, yes. And they're
Do
like,
you like
he's
Drew
out.
Holman?
Not allowed on jury duty.
Anyways, starting with you, Leah, talk about like your involvement in Hardrock this year and like what your day or days looked like.
Yeah, so this was my, I think, 4th or 5th trip out to the San Juans. The San Juans are actually not a bad drive from Salt Lake City. To get to Uray, it's probably about 6 hours from us. Silverton, 6:45. So not a bad trip. I love it there.
That's pretty good.
It's good. Like it's not bad at all. And you've got halfway is Grand Junction or Moab, depending on which way you go. So easy road trip.
Wow.
But yeah, my first time at Hardrock, which I was really nervous about because I was going to be on the ground reporting on the live stream at 3 aid stations and then in the studio for 6 hours on I think like hour 30 to 36 time frame. So really nervous about it. The night before, I felt like I had pre-race jitters as if I was racing the race myself because I had so much nerves. Mike and I were both laying there like unable to sleep. I think we were both equally excited, but also just pretty nervous for what the day would entail. But it was awesome. I was on the ground at 3 spots. I started early in the day at Catman, at mile 18. And then I was at Animus Forks, which was mile 57.9. And then I was at Cunningham, which was around mile 91. And I was at each of those places probably for a minimum of 3 hours, maximum of 6. Like I think on average, I was probably 4 to 5 hours at each of those spots. And if you know anything about Hardrock or you followed along with Hardrock, there's some big gaps between runners. So I think even at my Cunningham aid station later at night, the gap between some of these runners was just gigantic. So much so that Mike and I were able to go from Cunningham down to the finish, back up to Cunningham, might have went back down to the finish on one occasion to be a finish line camera runner for Ludo. But other than that, I just felt like I was actually everywhere on the day and it was really fun.
Were there any, I guess one thing I'm curious about, just because it's such a remote area of Colorado, was it easy to communicate with like sort of the central command of the live stream? Like, did you feel like the video piece of it, the audio piece of it was sufficient just given the challenges of being in that area?
Yeah. I mean, it was impressive given where we were at. For people following with the live stream, and especially those people who love to complain about the live stream production, there is absolutely no cell service in those mountains. You lose cell service the second you start driving from point A to point B. And the fact that we could bring coverage and the quality of coverage that we did from various spots, I thought was extremely impressive. We had Starlinks up in these more remote mountain spots like Animus Forks, Sherman, Cunningham Gulch. And like, yeah, these are places you would otherwise not have access to. So I thought that was extremely impressive. We were limited by the inability to have drone coverage in the San Juans. It's actually allowed in the San Juans, but race administration does not allow it. So I do think that would be pretty cool if we could provide that from the race. But I think what we were able to provide was pretty great. Obviously, some mistakes, some learnings, some limitations that we experienced, but altogether, pretty high quality. I think there was a lot of people consuming the live stream who had just consumed the whole Western States live stream and was comparing and contrasting it to that. And a lot of people were saying like, oh, the production wasn't as good as that. It was less exciting. But I think Hardrock and Western States are just extremely, extremely different races for a variety of reasons. So I think Hardrock, the live stream felt like it did it justice. And it was really, really cool to be a part of.
Brett, you got to consume it this time around, which is super cool. And I think this kind of completes sort of the triangle of ways that we were able to view, watch Hardrock this year. Talk about what it was like from your perspective, stuff you noticed, etc.
Yeah, so I was pretty glued to the live stream, like more or less for the first 24 hours of it. I was up super, super early Saturday morning because I had to head up to Mount Ashland because the Siskiyou Out and Back runs were on Saturday. So pretty much like maybe an hour or two after Ludo's finish was the last bit of the live stream that I actually got to watch because then I was up there on the mountain all day. But, you know, I got to watch the first, 24 hours, like pretty continuously. And it was fun because I was watching the live stream, but I mean, fortunately, I just never got kicked out of the Hardrock like media WhatsApp group chat. So I always had my finger on the pulse of what was going on in the background regarding like who was where, so and so's audio is muted. Gimbal runner number 1, can you please turn the like screen lock off on your phone? But one of the biggest things that, it looked really smooth from the YouTube point of view, but from the background, there's always little tiny fires popping up everywhere. And they were all getting extinguished much quicker this year than last year. Whether that was just audio getting figured out, within a minute or two from the studio, or like, someone's camera settings are not the way they're supposed to be. Everything was way smoother than last year in regards to just how quickly everyone was able to actively problem solve out there. And for those reasons, that I thought the coverage was awesome. And like you said too, it's very different from the Western States live stream. Like Western States were like trying to follow this like pretty tight bunch of runners from start to finish, and it's like 15 to 18 hours, whereas Hardrock, you're a little bit paying attention to the front, but you're also like some of the biggest, like, I don't know, stoke was, following the like last runner in and out of some of the spots, like out of Telluride. I think it was Telluride, Laney, whoever Laney was. The chat was absolutely blowing up watching Laney like come into the aid station, like do all their things and then make it out. Like that was the most like unified and active the chat was the entire time. There's like 5,000 people just absolutely rooting for last place at Hardrock. What are we, like 30 miles in at that point? That was super cool. And that, after being at Hardrock last year, like that's kind of what Hardrock is about, because it's like truly trying to get every single person around that loop.
Yeah. And the one thing I want to add to, because I do think some people know this, but Jamil was out there running Hardrock, and Jamil often plays a huge part in these live stream productions. So, I think that speaks to the trust that he has in his production team. But also, like, he got great content out on course while running Hardrock, and I tuned into some of this after the fact. I think like maybe day of, a little bit later when I was taking breaks from the live stream. But there's one of the Hardrock Chronicles that's the Jam Cam that's about 7 minutes long, and it's Jamil out on course during the race in the early miles interviewing different runners around him. And I think that was just production gold. It gave context to some of those mid packers, some of those back of the packers that we don't often get to hear from in live streams. and I loved it so much. Go watch it. It's amazing if you haven't already.
Yeah, to add to that, I had a chance to see Jamil and team in the gymnasium getting the studio set up. And from what I heard from his team, like he was just around the clock. Instead of resting ahead of the race, like most people would be doing, staying as horizontal as possible, he was just like spinning around, helping the team get every little final preparation done. So he was, from what I could tell, working right up until the last moment to make sure that the live stream was sort of good to go. And then, yeah, to your point, Leah, about the Hardrock Chronicles, I love that he was in the race himself, but he still had like the presence of mind and the energy to think about the people around him. And like, he was still staying true to being a content creator. And obviously it was a great production. Like just, and he made an acquisition like a day later. Like, you know,
he was signing contracts. He was signing contracts like while out on course.
I think Debo and Corinne, when they do their year in review, they have that Bill Duper award thing. And I think for 2 years straight, they gave Jamil the award, and they just said, like, we have to create the Jamil Coury award because we're going to keep giving him the award year over year because he just keeps one-upping himself. But yeah, that was wild to see. I don't have that stamina.
Dude, yeah, Jamil's on a heater right now.
Oh, man,
I
seriously.
love it.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about what I did. I was sort of a free agent out there. Wasn't really attached to like a brand partnership. Just kind of, I was actually being a rookie. Like from here on out, I think I'm going to pick 1 or 2 races each year where I try to build on these video skills. Like I think what I ended up doing was just creating a bunch of reels following Courtney, and I'm currently working on a vlog for all of her highlights. I'm really bad at it, but I will say it feels good to be new at something again. Like I think, you know, I've been doing the podcasting thing for a while, and then a lot of people on the team have been doing just amazing photo work and video work. I wanted to at least try it out. And when you get in the process, it just makes you appreciate how good people like Mike and Scott and Drew and Hillary, anybody that's in the content creator space, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I've been sitting here the last 6 hours. It's taken me like an hour to edit each minute of video. It's like adding the special effects, titles, transitions, trying to build narrative arc storylines. Like I'm so new and bad at it. It's crazy, but that's what I did. So really, like my involvement over the weekend, I kind of was hoping that Zach and Courtney would run, and I would just do my best to follow both of them. It ended up being just Courtney, but it was fun to kind of get to as many spots on the course as possible and follow her. I think I hit 7 spots, which was pretty cool. Previous year, my first year at the race, I made some pretty catastrophic driving mistakes, like missing the Sherman aid station, going over Cinnamon Pass. It just wiped instantly 10 hours out of the day. And I was like 1 year wiser this year and was super efficient, like going over Ophir Pass instead and hitting Telluride. This course is also way more hospitable, I think, to media than the counterclockwise route. Yeah, that's one of my big takeaways. Like if and when I go back next year, there's, I think, more remoteness from like a media fan spectator standpoint, because that whole section, like after Cunningham to basically Engineer and Uray, is you have to make some pretty tough driving decisions to get out to those spots. And it kind of takes away a lot of the daylight, you know. It's so this year there was a lot more spots in that daylight section to see people. But yeah, that was my day, being new at video, following Courtney, seeing, like, gaining even more appreciation for Kevin and the crew, how Courtney races. I'm actually wearing the Courtney triple shirt in admiration today for this episode. And yeah, just like Mike McMonagle, so good at what he does. Drew Darby, Scott Hickenlooper, like I want to be like them. It's going to take many years of deliberate practice, but got a taste of it this past weekend. Brett, how about the live stream numbers? Do you have any rough numbers for how like popular it was this year?
I don't remember what they were last year, but so there were 7 streams from start to finish, and that's not including like preview show or the awards ceremony, but just kind of eyeballing the numbers, there was a little, at the current moment, there's like a little under 300,000 total views across
wow,
the 7 streams, which I don't know, that seems like a pretty big number to me.
Okay.
Yeah, especially and the other thing too is like this race is so much longer in terms of time that's being streamed than a Western States, and people are watching this thing at like strange hours. I mean, I was up at 3 a.m. on Saturday, and it was, you know, I could not believe that I missed Ludo's finish. I was like, I'm going to be up at 3 a.m. I'll see him finish, and he had already been done for like an hour, maybe even 2 at that point. And there wasn't any finisher coming in for probably 1 or 2 more hours, but there was still like 4,000 people watching the live stream. It's like 3 a.m. on the West Coast, like 4 local time, 6 on the East Coast. Like it's early, like no matter how you cut it. And there was like 4,000 people watching.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Leah, do you feel pressure at all? Like when you're there as a reporter and there's that many people watching, you can kind of see the view count. Does that get in your head at all? Or are you just like so used to it at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this was my first time ever being in studio in addition to being in the field. And we got in studio and I had my lovely partner, Mike McMonagle, with me on the mic. And anything I do with him, I feel extremely comfortable. But he did warn me that once we go in studio, he's like, I need to take pictures of like the podium women. So I'm going to have to ditch you for a little bit. And I was like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We get on the mic, and I kid you not, it's within 3 minutes of being on the microphone, us two together. He's like, gotta go get Katarina's finish. I'm like, no, we just started. So then it's me holding the conversation. I'm like, this is my worst nightmare. I'm so bad at this. And of course, like I'm thrown to the wolves immediately. So I would say in that moment, it was like, oh, what the heck am I doing? I'm so stressed out, but we got this type of mentality. And let's just like pretend I'm in the field doing what I do. So that moment I felt a little bit of pressure just because I had nobody, because we had no field reporters at the time either. So it was just me, which I've
you
got
in the chat.
Me in the chat. So me and all my friends. But I would say, if anything, I felt a little bit of imposter syndrome with Hardrock coming into it. And I think that is why I had so many nerves initially, was I've never run the course before. This is my first time out here. And then to do the race and the runners justice, and especially the runners who have such a tied history to the event. That's something that Hardrock really emphasizes, is the community, the history, the people who are going after their like 17th finish, being able to tell those stories the best I could. I was feeling really nervous about that aspect of doing the history of the race justice, but I think it did come together really nicely in the end.
Yeah. I could totally relate to that, because that was exactly how I felt last year, just being like, you're in the Hardrock live stream. You ever been to Silverton before? I'm just like, yes, when I was 2 years old. There's a picture of me in front of the train station. Like,
wait, that's awesome.
And they're like, good, you're hired. I'm like, okay. But one of the nice things though with Hardrock is that you have the like the essence of time at a lot of spots. So like, you know, especially like even in the studio, it's like you need to go Google something and like read up a little bit on it. Like there's time for it. Or, you know, even when you're out on the field, you can just like pop over to like someone's crew or like one of the aid station people and be like, what were they mining here at Animas Forks? And they're like, oh, well, let me tell you, back in the early 1900s, it was iron and then it was silver before then. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I will say, and I gave Brett a call, I think the night before the race, just to debrief his Western States field commentary experience, because I knew that Hardrock was going to be a little bit different than my ones in the past, where it's like Black Canyon, I know that course well. I know all the athletes in that field really well. Same with Javelina, things like that. But something I'm not as comfortable with is talking to aid station volunteers, talking to crew members. So I think Hardrock, especially because we had such decent chunks of time between runners, it allowed for me to do a lot more of that and get a lot more comfortable doing that as well. And it also, especially when we were in studio, lent it an opportunity to really engage with the chat, because there's a lot of runners in this race that we were talking about that we didn't have a lot of information on, but there's tons of willing participants in the chat who want to tell you about their runner who is coming back from 2 spinal surgeries in the last year. This is their first 100 back, and they want to tell you that history, that story about their person. And I really enjoyed that aspect of being able to take what I'm learning in the chat and bring it to life in studio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brett, what was your advice?
Gosh, Leah, what did I say? Did any of it end up mattering at
All I
all?
know is I was laying on the floor in my Airbnb, like on the phone for like an hour, just like, yep, yep, yep. And no, it was also helpful though, because you talked about what went well at Western States, what didn't go well, like the things that you've leaned into that you found successful. And I think I'm an introvert by nature. So, like, yeah, I know I'm in front of the camera pretty often and I'm on podcasts pretty often, but I get really nervous, like engaging with people and feeling like I'm disrupting a moment. And I think, Brett, you gave me confidence to do that a little bit better.
Yeah, I think you did a great job. Yeah, you're commentating and just kind of knowledge that you brought, from each of the aid stations. There was one moment that I was watching. I think you were at Animus, and you're like, yeah, like the day before, you were like, yeah, I just like don't know that much about the course and like all the things, but like I'm just gonna see what I can remember. And then like you rattled off just like some historical split data of like a section split from, I don't know if it was like Courtney or Katarina coming in, and you're like, oh yeah, from last aid station to this station is like this many miles, and they've historically done it in like this many hours, and they just did it in this, and that's gonna put them at like fifth fastest split for this. And I was like, what? So you fooled everyone. I think you're just an expert at this point.
Yeah, Leah, what you said there about worrying that you would disrupt a moment, I felt the same way throughout the entire, whatever it was, 24 to 36 hours I was out there. And I don't know how to work through. I don't know if anything worked for you in like picking moments, but like trying to follow Courtney around and trying to be as like respectful as possible, like keeping the camera kind of at a certain distance and being around the aid station transitions, but also kind of just being like a fly on the wall instead of like intrusive. I still don't know if I have the right playbook for it, but I felt the same level of nerves. Did anything in particular end up working for you?
No, just reading the room and like respecting the runners too. I think there was a moment that Katerina was coming into Animus Forks and
Yeah.
she had told someone like she didn't want any media around her. So like respecting those moments. But then also reading the room and knowing what might have been a good moment. So one of my favorite engagements that I had was at Cunningham Gulch, which is 9 miles to go, when Ludo's pacer came in with him. And I think he might have taken another pacer from there to the finish. And seeing his pacer plop down in a chair after Ludo had exited the aid station, grab a can of Coke, and just walk over and ask him, like, how did that section go? What was that like? What were you telling Ludo out there to keep him going? And that one felt extremely natural. It felt like the perfect moment to have that conversation. And I felt like what I got from him was just like pure gold and exactly what I wanted from that interaction. So I think just understanding like who's kind of important in that moment and what you can get out of them was extremely helpful.
If we're on the topic of favorite moments, I actually have to pull out a listener question. Brett, this is directed towards you. They say, we need Brett to go play by play on that winning move Ludo pulled on Francois early. And I mean, Mike highlighted this too, because Mike got some amazing video of this.
Yeah. I mean, there's like, well, like not only, I think that the live stream got it too. But there was like 4 different camera angles of Ludo and Francois hiking up to the very top of Grand Swamp Pass, which is so damn steep. Like I remember last year, like I did not have, like I was wearing trail shoes, but they like could barely grip on that gradient. And I had like 0% chance of running that. Just the ease at which Ludo was able to just break into like a literal bound and just jokingly look over and be like, ha ha, this is my move. Like I was half serious, but also being like, dude, if you're just straight up fit enough to do that and like have the confidence that that's not going to mess you up at all, 10 miles into the race, dude, you're probably going to win. And then just the way he sent it down off the other side, like like the camera, as steep as it looked on camera, it's steeper than that. Like it's one of those ones where like you look over the edge and you get the willies because you're like, ugh, I don't want to fall down that. And like every single runner just has to jump into it. And the way he just skied down it, and just even opened up like 30 seconds on Francois there, like probably not on purpose. Everyone's just trying to get down off the mountain. I was like, holy crap, dude, this guy's probably going to win. But
and
dude, it was nuts.
Bound that he had, I just looked at my run because I went up to Grant Swan Pass the other day, and I looked at the high point, and it's 12,900 feet. So he is bounding at almost 13,000 feet. Like, it was all in jest, yes, but at the same time, his ability to do that and look unfazed by it was remarkable.
Yeah,
we were driving into Animus Fork. Leah, probably you would have been on the way there too, or you could have already been there. But as we're driving into the last stretch of Animus Fork, the aid station there, mile 57 something, to our right, Ludo had just left the road and was climbing up towards Handy's with his pacer. And I was blown away by his stride length. Like, in general, even beyond that pass at Grand Swamp Pass, I couldn't believe his stride length going uphill that late in the race. Like, similar to Jim's sort of bouncy running style that you see, at Forest Hill during Western States, etc. Ludo has one of the most distinctive gaits I've ever seen. And to see him expending that much energy late in the race and somehow it being sustainable, I was blown away. We had to stop the car and just like watch as like a spectacle of human endurance and biomechanics. It was wild.
Yeah. I mean, he looked untouchable the entire day. I mean, I remember, like, I think it was him hiking up out of Telluride. He was just like making his way through kind of the neighborhoods before hitting the trail. And like the amount of pop that he had just in his hiking stride, it was fascinating to see. Like, I was just like in awe. I was like, dude, how does someone he has so much power. That's what it was. It's like, he's not really, I don't think he's the smoothest runner. Like, it's unique. It's like, it doesn't look very economical, but then when you like throw him on a technical descent, I'm like, you're also still not taking that many steps, but it doesn't seem like, it's like he's moving the ground underneath him. Instead of him moving across it. I was like, this dude just has so much power. It was mind-blowing to see.
There should be Chuck Norris memes, but for Ludo in ultra running.
I know. Like, that's how I feel about it now.
I have a bunch of favorite moments. Leah, were there any other ones for you personally that come to mind on the day?
I enjoyed this one moment. I think it was at Animus Forks when I was doing some of my calculations of course record pace and Ludo being up on course record pace. And I was talking to his crew, and I asked the one crew chief, I believe, her friend, if she knew and if they knew that he was 22 minutes ahead of course record pace. And she looked at me, she's like, there's absolutely no way. And I was like, no, like, he is. And I was like, does he know that? And she said no. And I came to understand throughout the next couple aid station interactions, he did not know that, and nor did he want to know anything about his positioning relative to like Killian's time on the course. So what he was putting out was not even driven by chasing the ghost of Killian. It was his best effort, and that was his effort on the day. So I thought that was especially interesting as a runner who caters a lot of my efforts to historic splits, to time, to knowing what I can do on said course. He was just out there doing what he needed to do. And I think that was a really refreshing way of looking at the result he ended up having then.
Yeah, I wrote that note down as well. It's just like the psychology behind Ludo's win, in that it looked like one of the most stress-free victories, which then kind of reminded me of like every sprint coach will tell their sprinters, your 80% effort is going to be your fastest, because if you go 100%, you actually start to tighten up, your stride lengths gets shorter. And for like sprinters, they're like, you need to be relaxed. So it's like, just go 80% effort. That was like the sprint equivalent that I was watching Ludo, where like he just looked so chill and like having fun, but not wasting any time out there. Where I was like, dude, he's giving his 80% effort, but that's actually the fastest because he's relaxed. And then I started thinking of like, I wonder what Zach Miller being in the race would have done from a psychological standpoint. Like, because Ludo was just so far in front, nearly the whole time, did that lay off a layer of pressure? Like, what if Zach was on Ludo's heels the whole time? Does that get in Ludo's head, or is Ludo still that unflappable? Like, I mean, it's a big what if, but I was curious about like what that would have done from a psychology standpoint.
What do you think Zach would have run on the day? Would he have run in that orbit of 21 to 30? Would he have been even farther ahead of that, trying to dip into the sub 21 area? Like, where do you anticipate he would have been on the day, given his preparation and mindset heading in?
I will. I think of something I want to preface this with is I feel very sad for Zach Miller and not being able to make it to the start line. I'm grateful that he didn't run. It was so cool to see Ludo do what he did out there. Like, I think we all, like, had Zach been running this race, we all had this expectation that, like, he'll probably blow this course record out of the water. He'll probably get the course record. I don't think anybody was having that conversation about Ludo. So I really think it gave him the opportunity to shine and do what he does best. So while I'm very sad that Zach couldn't make it to the start line, really cool to see somebody else get their moment and probably have the best race of their life, which was awesome.
Yeah,
I think Zach could have broken the course record as well. But Brett, that's a good point about the psychology of just like the dynamic that would have led to in the race.
Yeah. And it goes both ways too, of like, you know, Zach has said in many interviews, like, you know, he's like always all out, like always going to try and get to the finish as fast as possible. And, you know, he's said at times, like it was like the last time he ran JFK, he was like literally timing intervals as he was trying to break Eric Sensman. Like he was doing minute on, minute offs just to try and like get in Sensman's head. But then like it wasn't working. What if Zach is, you know, actively trying to drop Ludo and Ludo's just like, nah, I love mountains. Like that could get, you know, that if Ludo is keeping the same mindset that he had during, you know, last weekend, maybe it starts to lay the pressure on Zach in a negative way. And I mean, I wrote it down. I was like, Brett's hot take of the episode. I don't think Zach's beating Ludo on that day. The day Ludo had, I don't think Zach's beating him, because Ludo could have gone faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that probably would have led to Ludo running that last section faster. So there, a lot of the conversation this weekend was about how Killian ran from Cunningham to the finish in an hour 45. I think Ludo ran like hour 56. But Killian was racing Francois on that section. Mm-hmm. So he had a fire under him to really push him. Granted, Ludo was chasing the course record at that point, and he did know, I think, starting at Cunningham, what that course record was. But I think that would have led to even faster times.
We did a super brief interview with Zach the day before the race when we found out that, you know, he wasn't going to be able to race. And I asked him the question, you know, what would you do alternatively? And he talked about races, FKTs. One thing he didn't mention, but it showed up in the comment section, it seems like it was sort of possible breaking news, was that shortly after this Hardrock concludes, he would strongly consider time trialing the course, you know, with crew and pacers, like whatever it was, 2018 Jim Walmsley style. I don't know what year he went out and tried to do that. There's like a YouTube film about it.
I think he did 2020.
During COVID, 2020.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool. Like
that would be really cool.
He talked about Nolan's and a couple other things in that high altitude arena, but this time traveling would be really interesting. So, you know, it's July 16th. He looks like he's back to hard running on Strava. I don't know what he's going to do, but be on the lookout.
Man, can we get the live stream crew back out there?
Or just anyone that wants to go, if they're in the area, go and provide updates or something. That would be sweet.
Yeah, just get a collective Instagram group story going. Yeah, that's interesting of like, oh, Zach's not racing Hardrock this year. Like, what do you want to see him pivot to? And like, I couldn't think of much that like I wanted to see him do. It was kind of like, oh, if he's out for Hardrock, then like, dude, just rest up, bank this training block, you know, get ready for something bigger. But like, I was like, you don't need to. I mean, that was before thinking of like a solo time trial around it. That's pretty cool. But the only other thing that it's like kind of out of left field that I thought would be really cool to see Zach. I would love to see Zach Miller run Leadville.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's not, has nothing to do with the training that he's been doing, but I have a feeling that if he just like with the fitness that he has, and like Zach's pretty good at running. Dude, I bet he could do something cool at Leadville.
I can see how this would make some people angry just based on like what's transpired politically in the sport the last 12 months. But as a fan who wants to see really good racing, I don't care what was said in the past.
Mm-hmm.
The recency in me, I would like to see him do UTMB.
Yeah, I thought about that
race
too.
Tom, race Jim.
Just it already happened though. Like I mean, yeah, the rematch would be sweet, but like,
but how many more times do we get it? You know?
Yeah, how could it be better than last year though? Like, is Zach beating Jim a better outcome than Jim beating Zach? Like, I don't know, because then people are like, well, it's because Jim did the Western States or UTMB double, blah blah blah. So it's like, I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, it would be sweet to see Zach race UTMB, like politics aside. But it's like, I feel like he's got to feel pretty good about the race.
Yeah,
you know, after last year's race, because it was an incredible performance.
It was amazing. Yeah, I have a couple favorite moments. I'll kind of quickly list them off. The first one was just happening to see Jim Walmsley at Animus Fork in a non-media context, him and his crew, and I think he was with Francois' team. They were positioned like on the bluff just overhead of the aid station. He was getting ready to pace Francois. I got there maybe 60 to 90 minutes ahead, and so it was cool to like see him go through the motions of getting ready to pace, like what he was eating, stretching, warming up. There was a really like after sort of the prolonged waiting for Francois to come through, it was really funny to see him debate whether he should drink caffeine, you know, because like if you know you would drink caffeine to get through the night with Francois, but like what if he's dropping? Like there was sort of like that whole consideration going on. The moment later on at Animus with Francois, when he came through with his family, it was pretty emotional. He decides to drop. That was interesting to see. I think the really cool moment, I think, Leah, you were there as well. When Courtney comes through shortly after, she sort of stops to acknowledge him in Courtney fashion, tries to encourage him to keep going, gives him a big hug before pressing on. That was super cool. Mm-hmm. And then the last one for me, and I wish I had asked this more of people that I kind of got on camera, but leaving Uray, Jason Schlarb was in second place. And I asked him like on camera, you know, what's your mantra for the second half of the race? And he was ready with this brilliant answer. He's like, hunt in the dark, be happy when it gets great. I'm like, damn, like you had that on command. That was sick. And I wish I had asked that of like Courtney and Ludo and Francois. So that was cool. And then the very last one, if anyone goes to Hardrock in future years and you're in Uray, my tradition is no matter what time of day it is, I go to Maggie's. It's this like soul food, greasy burger fries outfit. And I, you know, overcoming my trauma from Western States, I walked into Maggie's. I ate 2 burgers, got like an extra large fry, and it worked. It settled. Yeah, I did not barf any of it back up, and I'll be going back there again next year. So Maggie's and Uray. But yeah, those were my 4 moments, all somewhat different. I guess a lot happened at Animus Fork, but yeah, that was.
I had another one that came to mind. I didn't get to witness this in person, but I was privy to being on Starlink out at the aid stations I was covering. But it was the follow cam of Cammie and Courtney around mid race. I think that was Telluride time frame. We rarely see Courtney racing with or against people in a race, and seeing those two roll in together was really awesome and exciting and cool to see, because I know Courtney wasn't feeling her hottest. Well, she was feeling pretty hot middle of the day. But I think it allowed for other people to be with her, which was unique and something we don't get to see very often.
Yeah, can we do a little women's race like analysis and breakdown?
Oh, of course. Yeah,
because like we know like Ludo did his thing and like broke the course record, but yeah, I thought the women's podium was, you know, tighter than it had been in, you know, many years, and you know there was like those top 3, like they were like no one was ever like really out of striking distance for a long time. And you know, yes, Courtney broke her course record, by like 30 minutes, and bettered her time from last year by a few minutes. But I think one thing that I saw in the live stream was many moments of like Courtney looking far from invincible during the day. Which, that just has me like is interesting just to see that like fresh Courtney this year, full focus on Hardrock, like only a few minutes faster than last year. Like, I mean, I know Courtney's deserves a lot of credit for breaking her course record and running well, but like, the selfish fan in me was thinking there was going to be more. And I would be curious to, hear what like Courtney thought about, the quality of that performance versus, I mean, it doesn't even have to be versus anything else, just the quality of it in general. Cause I feel like she did leave a lot of time on the table.
Totally. And I think it's really easy to look at a Hardrock course record and be like, oh my God, a Hardrock course record, like incredible performance. But I agree with you, Brett, like coming into this race, in my mind, my expectation was Courtney's going to run 24:30 on this course.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I think she has that in her. I absolutely do. Yeah. Like I don't think there's a world where she's 3 hours plus behind Ludo. Like I actually think that is what I would expect, is about 3 hours within where he is. So yeah, I think there's something about the Hardrock course where we still haven't seen Courtney at her best quite yet, which I'd be terrified to see her best if all of her last 3 iterations of Hardrock have all been consecutive course records. But I do think she's got at least an hour and a half, if not 2 hours faster in her.
Yeah.
I think at least 2 hours. I think at least 2, because a 13% differential is 24.5. And I think it can get well under 10%.
Yeah. Like, I wonder what it is about this course that is like tough to crack for Courtney, because she lives up in Leadville. Like she gets the altitude, the mountains, but yeah, I mean, this is an extremely tough course. Was it warm at all out there this year? Like last year was hot too.
I think the heat was what got to her early.
Yeah. I think so too. And I think even talking to Kevin at a couple of the aid stations, I think it's the combo of the heat and the altitude in Hardrock for her.
Yeah.
If anything, like if I was completely guessing and from what I was observing, because it was hot. And even though it's like 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit out there in the sun, in the direct sun, which there was a lot of direct sun during the day, it is hot. So I don't think that's easy. And I don't think people treat this like they do Western states. Like I think I said this on the live stream at one point. We saw no ice bandanas. We did see people getting wet. Like Jason Schlarb left one of the aid stations like drenched. And we saw people doing that. Courtney was doing her similar cooling, but I think you might need to treat this, just like it's any other hot race. And I don't think it gets treated that way.
Did the aid stations have ice in the same way Western does?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just creek water.
There's a lot of creeks though.
Yeah, there is a lot of water opportunities. Do you think Courtney comes back to this race to like I feel like if she comes back to Hardrock again while she's still in the prime of her career, it's like obviously to run faster than she has before. But that's never the narrative she wants going into a race. Like, do you think that deters her in any way from coming back to this race where it's like obviously to run significantly faster?
I don't think it deters her. I actually think that would encourage her in some ways, because I think she knows herself best. And I think she knows that she hasn't had her best day here yet. And I think she probably has this curiosity of, what is my best here? She knows what her best probably is here. And I think she knows she just hasn't done it yet.
To that point, she has a great line in the recent Solomon movie where she says, "I hope I can never say that I had a perfect race." It was something along those lines. And I think that she remains motivated if there's still time to shave or inefficiencies to fix, etc. I totally see her coming back, because I think of all the races that she's done, and on like the spectrum of like totally nailing it at Grand Raid to like a lot of performance left, I would put almost Hardrock at the other end of the spectrum. Like I think 2 hours is a lot. And I think we all agree, like, she has at least 2 hours on this course.
Mhm.
But I do
Yeah,
think there's a window, right? It's like maybe
totally.
in the next 2 to 3 years, like while she's still in the prime. I don't know how long her prime goes for. It depends on whether you subscribe to like the Scott Jurek burning matches theory or age. I don't
I
know
think it
where
depends on
you
the race too.
the race. Yeah.
Like Ludo's 48.
I mean,
Mhm.
almost 49. Like amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, and we see that too. Like, we see lots of success in masters, super masters runners at Hardrock because, as we've noticed, like it's not just about who can move their legs the fastest. There's like way more elements to it. But yeah, the women's race was it was really exciting to follow because like there was more racing going on, really. Like there was people moving around places, whereas like on the men's side, it was just like, yeah, Ludo's destroying everyone.
It was
Moving
amazing
on.
to me in the women's race, and I think I'm correct. It was relatively stable in terms of placement from like U-Ray onward, right? Like the last 50, 60 miles, like the podium was locked in. And it was just a matter of what were going to be the differentials between Courtney, Cami, Katarina. Was that surprising to either of you? That like
Nope.
that there was like
No.
there was little attrition and a lot of stability in the end results.
Yeah, no, that actually wasn't to me. That was pretty as expected. Uh, I didn't like. I thought we would have seen Katarina move up a little bit more towards Cami. I thought like in the later stage of the race, like I thought Cami was starting to have a low, and I thought Katarina would kind of scoop her up a little bit. That never happened. It actually seems like when Katarina was having a low moment, they were actually really, really low moments. And I remember being at Animus Forks, which was, just under 100K through like I think mile 57. And Kiami was about 30 minutes behind Courtney there. And then Katarina was maybe another like 11 minutes back. So they were all within 45 minutes of each other, which at Hardrock, 45 minutes is
That's
like,
not much.
it's not much. And I was peeking through aid station time of some of those later aid stations. And Katarina, when she started to have her really tough moments, she had an aid station at Pole Creek at mile 80 that she spent 29 minutes at. Then at Cunningham, she spent 36 minutes. So, I mean, I think at that stage of the race for her, she knew she was kind of in this locked in third. So she was probably more willing to spend that amount of time at aid stations. But people are making aid station stops like that. They're spending 30 minutes. They're spending 35 minutes. Tara Dower spent 68 minutes at an aid station to get things to settle down and ended up still being able to charge up to fourth place. So I don't think you can ever look at like a 40-minute gap at mile 50 and consider that race over. I still think there was potential for racing to happen. I just think everybody in that podium position, Courtney included, Courtney, Cami, and Katarina all suffered pretty huge lows between mile 65 and the finish, and they all happened to not be threatened by the other, that those positions then just maintained.
I mean, to that point about no lead being too safe, I was looking before this recording at the splits between Cunningham to the finish between Ludo and Diego and Jason and Courtney, and like at times there were like 30 to 40 minutes between them. So like you could even capture that in the last 9-10 miles of the race if you're feeling it. It's wild. Like the race is not even over at Cunningham.
No, and like we saw that. I thought the women's 4 through 7 race was really fun to follow. And we saw that actually Cunningham to the finish. I think Tara Dower was in 6th or 7th rolling into Cunningham and about 10 minutes off of the person in front of her. And then ended up splitting Cunningham to the finish at the same pace and the same time that Courtney did. And ended up taking over 2 or 3 of those people and then moved into 4th place. So if any one of those people is moving significantly faster just on that last section, 10 minutes is nothing, 20 minutes is nothing. Like, I think people are so dead at that point that like there can still be a lot of movement.
That reminds me, Leah, I got to bring in this listener comment because it's applicable. They say, somehow Tara Dower got through Hardrock of all races without being covered in blood. Discuss.
It was
I think there was a
astounding.
little blood.
There was a little blood. Okay. Amazing finish though, right? I mean, I didn't get to see it only through social media, but it looked somewhat heroic.
It did. And huge props to Devin Yanko too. Devin Yanko was pacing her out of Animus Forks. And we had heard that Tara had spent a lot of the day throwing up already. And I was like, Devin, how do you think this next section is going to go? And we were just talking about like the different strategies that Devin like might need to use to get Tara to like keep moving, because you go up to 14,000 feet on that section. So if you're already throwing up previously in the day, that section's not going to be any easier for you. And I think Devin just pulled out all of her veteran pacing and racing tactics, had Tara take a seat up at Burroughs. And like, I think that's a spot where she spent 68 minutes, just laid down, try to get things to settle. And I think without that stop, we wouldn't have seen Tara charge the way she did in that last like 10 miles of the race.
Yeah, it's like she burned an hour to save 5.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can do that at Hardrock. It's not like, I mean, maybe we'll get to this, but it's the competition isn't quite what we see at like Western States, for example. So you can see Katarina can spend 29 and 35 minutes at an aid station because she's not being threatened. Tara was being kind of threatened in those positions, but it served her well to take that because she knew kind of what would happen later.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we do some of those listener questions that are like very adjacent to that?
Yeah.
There's the first one up there. It's the first 2 in the notes.
Lead us.
The first 3 actually. Well, one was, does Hardrock need a better elite field?
I basically slept on it.
I don't think it does. I don't think, Hardrock's not really about that. Like even like Dale, the race director, does not call himself the race director. He's the run director,
right?
Because it's like everyone's equally as important, and it's kind of like when you show up to the your local turkey trot, your fun run. There's always going to be a couple people at the front who take it super seriously and hammer it, but for the most part, it's about like enjoying the course, enjoying the day out there, making sure you get home safely, and I typically am not about that sort of ethos for races, but I think after being at Hardrock and experiencing it for like how small of a field it is, and also for like, it's, you do need to have a good amount of mountain experience to do the loop. Like one of the main reasons for having like the veteran lotteries and keeping a lot of returners in the field, a lot of people complain it's a rich get richer sort of scenario. A lot of that is roped around safety and having like I remember Dale saying at one point, he's like, I like knowing that there's like 2 people who have finished the race or done it before around every new person, just in case like shit hits the fan out there on course. And I'm like, and there's absolutely years where lightning, like crazy storms. Too. Yeah, where it's like I actually kind of understood that from just a safety standpoint. He's like, I don't want 95 new people on this course because it just gets dangerous. And there's a lot of knowledge that can be absorbed through some of these veterans. That like like spending the week up Camp Hardrock. So yeah, like does it need a better elite field? Like, I mean, it would be cool to see like the 30 best athletes in the world go and hammer this loop, but I don't think it's at the Hardrock, like the actual Hardrock race.
It would need a better elite field if that was the priority of the race, but not race, run. If that was the priority of the run, yes, of course they would need a better elite field, but that's not their priority. It's all about, it's like a community event. It's a reunion. It's about showing off the spectacle that is the San Juan Mountains, about linking up these historic towns, Telluride, Ouray, Silverton, Lake City. Like one of the lower things on the totem pole is that competitive dynamic, right? Or the competitive depth. That's their priority, right? Like I think I was probably guilty of this at one point. I was like, oh, like how do we make Hardrock, deeper competitively? How do we, get the same level of, depth that like a Western or a UTMB has? But it's almost like asking the wrong question, because that's just not how the race was ever intended to be structured. And I mean, as long as, people are aware of the priorities, I think it's fine.
Yeah, it is interesting being at Western States recently and then coming to Hardrock. Mike and I just kept asking ourselves this weekend, like, what are the major differences we see between the two? And it's like Hardrock just made Western States feel like so easy to get into. Like whenever you're at Western States, you feel like anybody and everybody can run Western States, which is like I mean, pretty true, I think. Like, it made Western States just seem easy. And then Hardrock, it's like, you want to see this race resume. I think when I was rattling off race resumes, I'm like, oh yeah, this person's done Cascade Crest like 6 times. They've done Bighorn, they've done this. I'm like, they've done every race in the Mountain West circuit. Well, one of the reasons they've done every race in the Mountain West circuit is so they can keep getting their annual qualifier to get into Hardrock, and it's taken them 9 years to get into Hardrock. But what you then guarantee is, like you mentioned, they're a veteran, they have experience. I felt like these runners were a bit more like Grizzly in terms of just like experience and like grittiness and resilience out there. And I think the women's field, maybe 4 DNFs total. I think there was like an 85% finish rate amongst the women, which is amazing. However, I think women comprise like 22% of the field. Obviously, that number needs to increase, and we need to likely have a much larger representation of backgrounds across the board at Hardrock. However, I just think the 85% completion rate for women was just astounding.
Amazing. Yeah, I had it written down in my notes, like, what can we do to change the lottery? Because clearly, in my opinion, it overprivileges veterans. But then, Brett, you made that great point of like, you probably want a good number of stewards out on course to make sure that there's like some level of safety beyond the aid stations and medical people on course. So I don't know how you thread the needle there. But I do think one thing that I would like to see happen is a change of qualifiers, because I think, like, yes, this is a postgraduate race and the current list of races that get you in is legit. But I wonder if that's maybe also artificially constraining like a higher number of, for example, women entering the lottery, because it is kind of a small list. And maybe if we expanded that list of qualifiers with stuff that's, it's not the Wyoming Range 100, but like, I mean, you got to mention Cocodona, like throw Cocodona in there, throw in, Javelina. I don't know. Like, if you just complete 100, can you get in? Like, maybe that's one of the low hanging fruit things. Yeah.
I don't know about that.
I think you gotta be like, it's like hitting a Hardrock qualifier is like hitting an Olympic trials qualifier for like the marathon. It's like, it's hard for a reason, because like, you don't want that person to, you don't want to find on the Hardrock qualifier list the one race where it's like, oh yeah, I can cherry pick that one and get into the Hardrock. Like, that's not the point of the Hardrock qualifiers, because then that person severely reducing their chance of actually finishing Hardrock, and then that's a wasted spot, out there. So like, I understand the races being hard to qualify for Hardrock. There's definitely some out there that could be Hardrock qualifiers for sure. And I don't know if they have like a set number of like, the Hardrock qualifier list can only be like 40 races or something like that, or if it can grow. I don't know what there's rules for Western States qualifiers. I don't know what they are for Hardrock. But yeah, it's actually funny. Like, pretty much every Hardrock qualifier itself sells out too. So like, in that sense, you're already keeping the lottery capped at a certain size anyways, because we already know exactly how many people are going to put into the Hardrock lottery basically every year.
Yeah. One thing because one of the questions on here, I got to pull it up, and we're talking about it now, but why does this race continue to be important on the calendar? How did it get so popular? How did it get so big? Why so much media attention? I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I think that there are historical accidents that happen. Like, there are some things that you build with like clear intentions at the outset to blow up, like you want to commercialize it. Then there's other scenarios where like you build things with more organic interests in mind. I think Hardrock is the latter. Like, I've heard Dale say on other podcasts that he never envisioned that this was going to get popular. He never thought he'd have to grapple with like lotteries or wait lists. Like, that was just not what they were imagining could happen in 1991 or 1992. And I also think there's just been really key people in the sport that have fallen in love with it. Like, I think it helps a ton that Brian and Megan Powell at I Run Far are just enamored of this race, and they want to throw their team at it and cover it start to finish. I think, Jamil has run it 7 times. It helps that he's put, vlogs of this together. He wanted to, pitch the live stream to it. For Dylan Bowman at Free Trail, it's become a hugely important like part of his identity, and he's had some really key moments here in 2021 and 23, and came back and volunteered at Chapman this year. So I think there's just a lot of things organically that have conspired to blow it up. And I don't know if it was like this, there's not really like a conspiracy going on here, or like, anything that's like undeserving. It just happened,
Yeah, and I mean, like, even for the 1990s, 2000 time frame, it was like a lot of the important people in the sport were drawn to Hardrock. Like David Horton, Rock Horton. Come the 2010 time frame, Jared Campbell. It was like Darcy PQ, like this whole community. And I think that's what they stand for, is very much community and like your people. And I think that's what you see represented at Hardrock year over years, is just that's what they emphasize. That's what they stand by. And I think that's what's attracted people over time too. And like, I would argue we have few very satisfying 100-mile looped courses in the United States. Put it at altitude and put it in the most beautiful place in the mountains that we have. Obviously, Hardrock is going to attract people who want to do an amazing loop in the mountains. I think Mike was commenting to somebody on Instagram recently that the U.S. is undeniably soft in trail design when it comes to our mountain races, often due to permitting restrictions. And I think Hardrock is one of those like picture perfect courses in terms of a loop, gritty, hard, and like impossibly hard. And I think it attracts people for that reason.
Yeah. And it goes through like all the major towns in the area. Like
Which
that's the other thing too. Which like you don't get that in most of our other US like mountain hundreds. They're all like remote aid stations, middle of nowhere. And like those are cool. And Hardrock has those too. And there's a certain charm to that. But then like getting to go through Ouray and getting to go through Telluride and then just immediately like disappearing off into the mountains, like just like what we see in a lot of the races in Europe.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, like you said, Leah, it's just like that uniqueness about the course. Like it's the course. I mean, I wrote down like you listed a lot of like great historic names, but I was like, is this just all Killian's fault for running it in 2014 and like being like, it was like, I mean, I'm sure he knew of the race, but then like really took a look at the mountains and took a look at the loop and was like, I have to do this. And then Killian did it. And then like, it seemed like there's like at the very top end of the race, it seemed like that like pushed the boulder over the edge in terms of like just the course record, just like getting knocked down by huge amounts.
What year did Dale's picks come into play?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know.
Do we have aid station Fireball on speed dial? Yeah, that is
someone is screaming into their headphones right now.
Yeah, Corinne is like 2002. Yeah, because like was Killian a Dale pick in 2014?
So it looks like at least back till 2017. I see something referenced on mountainoutpost.com. So at least prior to that.
Yeah. There was a question too.
By the way, I like the Dale's pick idea, and I want more races to have that public-facing drama around who just sort of gets a selection. I think it's cool. Like Western States,
like Survivor.
Yeah.
So like who gets voted on the island.
Yeah. And maybe there could be more theatrics to it in other races to kind of diversify. Like there could be a Survivor type show. Or like The Bachelor, but for races.
Well, we were saying, I think this was this in the Discord where it was like, what if one of Dale's picks stayed hidden until like 4:55 a.m. before the morning of the race, and then they just like popped out of this like big cloud of fog, and it was like Jim Walmsley has entered the field for the Hardrock 100, and like he's known about it forever, but they kept it a secret, and then they just had like new challenger emerges.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there'd be a lot of internet breaking potential things there. There was, the next listener question that was written down. It said Scott Jurek said Western States needs more people on course. What's that look like for Hardrock? Will Dale ever increase race capacity? And like my immediate was like, is that even possible?
Yeah,
because it's like what 150 or 145.
Liam, actually, let me see if I can pull up Liam's text, because he had, I think he might have DM'd it to me.
because like Western States is limited through the Granite Chief Wilderness. Like that's why they have such a weirdly specific number.
Yeah.
I was curious if there was anything like that for Hardrock. I know one of the big, like some of the aid stations are so remote that even for 150 people, that's a lot. That's a lot for the aid stations.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where on course the limitations are, or if it's like literally the entire region as a whole that's the limiting factor. Like I know, yeah, like you said with Western, that area in the high country is the bottleneck. But my guess would be that that entire region is the bottleneck, and that like you probably couldn't even create Hardrock today. I wonder if like there were just things bureaucratically in the early 90s that allowed this to be stood up, and then they're sort of grandmothered in. I wonder if Hardrock could even be created today in that region.
There's a lot of races like that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if there's a lot. There's more than one race like that.
Yeah, and like, to be honest, I kind of like the number that it's at from a safety standpoint, from a completion standpoint. It just seems like this makes sense, and I don't think I'd want to see more people in it, to be honest. Because honestly, they had a pretty good finishers rate this year. I think it was 81%, 119 of the 146 people finished, which is awesome. And I think that's great. I think somebody in the race, maybe it was Chris Twiggs or somebody else, said you can walk every step of Hardrock. He's proved that you can like walk every step of Hardrock and finish it. It might not have been him, it might have been somebody else. But I think, yeah, it's an extremely tough race. But I think with the number that we have right now, it's doable.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, maybe we'll like make a bet with all the runners where it's like the day we see 100% finisher rate, we'll increase the cap by 10 more spots.
Yeah.
Brett, can we get your shoe count and any observations from said shoe count?
So one thing that I thought was interesting prior to the race finishing, but just like midway through, was how much of a presence Solomon had at the front versus being like pretty non-existent at Western States. And like at Western States, I was like, well, yeah, it's because they've gone shorter and like they're everywhere on the sub ultras. And then all of a sudden I was like, Courtney and Cami and Francois. And I was like, oh, there's this weird, like giant gap of sponsored athletes for Solomon, and Western States does not fall in. It falls right in between like a lot of that gap, which that was interesting. I mean, the shoes, I feel like we see that, and some of these, the longer the race takes, the more like unhinged the shoe choices are, which is nifty. Because like on the women's podium, we had Courtney wearing the S-Lab Genesis, but it is actually a Courtney edition. There's a few tweaks to it. Like her heel cup actually has additional overlays around the sides of it to make it more stable. And I think her like toe bumper is a little bit beefier. So it's like just ever so slightly more like ruggedized. And Chris Myers was actually wearing it at States. And then Cami was wearing the S-Lab Ultra, the FDH, the like Francois signature shoe, which is their high cushion one. And then Katerina was wearing the Hoka Tectonex 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So kind of a splattering of shoe tech, lack thereof, like some pretty simple stuff, but then you have like a Tecton in there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like if Courtney and Katerina and probably Cami were running Western States, they'd all be wearing that same shoe that they wore at Hardrock.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I guess, yeah, the trail industry is trying to make us think that we need to buy specific shoes for all these courses. And turns out that's just a load of marketing baloney. Although I'm going to try my hardest to continue with that narrative.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like you're going to...
I want there to be course specific shoes.
The quiver.
Yeah.
Save the quiver.
Yeah, save the quiver. And then the men's side, we had Ludo was wearing the Tectonex 2.5. The Walmsley UTMB special edition shoe. And then Diego was wearing the Merrill Long Sky 2 Matrix, which we have a pair of, dude, there's not that much shoe there.
It's not, in fact.
Like props
was he
to
this
him.
guy right here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Crazy.
Like that's, I mean, I guess it's about as impressive as like Killian wearing his normals on this course. It's about like that. But just, yeah, not much. And then Schlarb was wearing a new Norda prototype. I don't know much about it other than it looked a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of, I think you just, in something like this, I think you just get to wear what you want. You get to wear whatever you're most comfortable with. Yeah.
On the nutrition side, we had Ludo, Diego, and Cami representing NAC. Courtney, of course, with Tailwind. Spring Energy getting some great PR when they need it most via Jason Schlarb. I don't know if he was actually using Spring out there, but Spring needs a hug. And Jason was out there on behalf of Spring. And then I think the most interesting one, we were talking about this offline, Katarina, according to Instagram, is sponsored by a grocery store. The company is called Sponsor Sport Food. And I don't know if the distinction there on Instagram is incorrect, because I went on the website, it looked like a solo brand with just a ton of selection, but I was not familiar. Maybe it's a Euro thing.
Didn't you say it's kind of looked like a European version of the feed?
Yeah, I thought so, but then I dug into it a little bit more, and I think it is just a unified brand with a ton of options, and it's for some reason labeled a grocery store on Instagram. But yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the big challenges of this race is how do you eat at altitude? Like, I remember a Dylan Bowman Hardrock recap from a few years back when he was saying, like, at a certain altitude, he went totally liquid calories, couldn't get solids down. I feel like this is a super tough nut to crack. I know Courtney had challenges, after Sherman late in the race nutritionally. I don't know if you have any thoughts here, Leah, but
yeah, the one thing I wanted to add was a tidbit shared by Iron Far out at I think mile 97 or so, that Yitka Win, who ended up getting, I think, 5th or 6th place on the women's side, she had consumed 55 goos up until mile 97. I think by the end, it was significantly more. And she said only one of those did not go down. So pretty impressive that, 55 goos, probably 60 plus during Hardrock. That's pretty amazing.
Dude, that's old school.
That's Hal Kerner or Carl Meltzer level iron stomach.
Yeah, I was about to say, I haven't heard a goo number like that since Hal telling me his story about Hardrock, where he was like, yeah, I had 2 goos an hour plus like aid station food every hour until I finished. And I was like, dude, that's 24 hours, like 48 goos. And he's like, yeah, vanilla or tri-berry, take your pick.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's actually, so Yitka ran 33:17 and her final goo number was 63. So she was eating roughly, pretty much 2 an hour, which is great. And then imagine you're having electrolyte drink and water and then some supplemental real food. Like, she's getting in probably a good 60 to 70 grams of carbs an hour minimum, I'd imagine. Yeah. My favorite food moment, I think, of the day was Diego when he came into Amnes Forks. He was asking for potatoes, and they didn't have any like boiled potatoes there or anything like that, but they had hash browns. So they gave him a plate of hash browns, and there's this moment on the live stream where he just goes like face to the plate and just like sucks up all the hash browns on his plate, and then is like out of the aid station in a second. I'm like, that was incredible.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's impressive. Like, yeah, I just feel like any ability to eat at that altitude is so impressive, because it really seems like the only way to like let things not get bad is to just go super, super slow. And there's so many parts of this course where like the only way your stomach's not turning south on a climb is to literally stop. But that doesn't help you get any further along the course. And it's like any amount of movement spikes the heart rate. And just like, the aerobic strength that some of these people have. The gal who got 6th eating the 60 goos, I bet she has one of the highest VO2 maxes of anyone in the field. Just keep that aerobic output low, able to eat the goos. That's going to be my correlation that I want to study for Hardrock.
Maybe a couple more listener questions here before we go. The first one, we'll do this one. who would be an athlete that you want to see run this race? Who is particularly compelling to you, either on the women's side or the men's side? Leah, you first.
Oh, of course, Leah Yingling.
Besides you.
Yeah. I think I can almost foresee two of Dale's picks next year being Katie Scheid and Marianne Hogan. And I would love to see both of them run this, to be honest. So those would be my two picks. I know you said one, but if I'm picking a third, obviously myself. But I'm curious. It seems like Dale does like getting people from abroad over here as well. So I'd be curious who the next like person like that's not North American would be that he'd want over here. Would it be someone like Ruth Croft, Blandine, Ida Nielsen? Wouldn't be surprised if it was somebody in that category.
Yeah, I kind of struggled with this one because like there's a whole bunch of elites where I'm like, yeah, I want to see them do this race, but then I also just kind of like learning about the people that get pulled from the lottery.
Yeah,
and like I don't know those people, and then I learn about them over the course of the race, and I'm like, I'm glad that they got into Hardrock. I want to see them do it. So, like, yeah, I didn't have a ton of names. I mean, of course, it would be great to see the spreadsheet that you build, Leah, for something like Hardrock. Yeah, you would be a fun person to watch on this course.
Sure.
I do think there should be a prerequisite though for Dale's picks to have entered the lottery at least prior for some amount of years to show like your willingness and your dedication to the race.
Yeah.
That's just me saying that. Like I think
like how much do you care?
How much do you care? Yeah. Like I think that would be cool. And like you have a history of applying. Like I think that should play in some element to it.
It's like the Barkley letter that you write to Laz about why you deserve to be there. I think people need to I have a perfect prop for this. People need to go get their
if you're watching
people need to get their Western or their Hardrock cardstock.
Why do you have
mail a nice letter to Dale about like, dear Dale, I wrote you but you still ain't calling. I left my cell, my pager, and my home phone at the bottom.
Hit me on my beeper.
Maybe something like that. I hope Mike McMonagle listens to that section of this episode. I don't care if he listens to anything else. But that's it.
He definitely.
Good.
I cannot.
I actually really like that idea, Leah, where there should be more to Dale's picks than just Dale's pick.
Yeah. That's profound.
I'll throw one name in there. I cannot replicate any of those theatrics, Brett. That was incredible. But one name, Tyler Green. I feel like he's transitioning. I hope. Well, I shouldn't say I hope. I get the sense that he could be transitioning away from this like flatter, faster-ish ultra running towards like true mountain stuff. We kind of see that, dabbling at Trans-Gran Canaria, Madeira, etc. Hardrock. I'd love to see him do Hardrock very soon.
Finn, I really thought you were going to say Caleb Olson.
Well, I mean, obviously,
because I didn't think of Caleb. I was trying to think like way more grand and not just like friends. Dude, I want to see Caleb run Hardrock.
Yeah, I mean, I think
after that Western States debut, oh my gosh.
Well, you just got to convince him that 22 to 25 hours of running is worthwhile. But I think that course is beautiful enough. And
I'll write a letter to Dale on behalf of Caleb.
So, let's see here. A couple more. Would the race allow alternatives to kissing the rock, such as fist bumping the rock? Thoughts?
I wrote down, if you fist bump the rock, your hand will burst into flames and Dale will roundhouse kick you in the face.
Wow.
Yeah. No, the only way you fist bump the rock is if you punch it with 100% effort.
Oh, no.
Just like Super Saiyan mode.
So take your pick. You either can kiss the rock gently or you have to try and punch it in half.
I don't know if you guys were following along around the, what was it, 35-hour mark. But there was a runner from Japan, Shinsuke Isomura, who came in, body slammed the rock, and then also kind of body slammed with his mouth when he gave it a kiss. And there was blood.
I saw that happen last year too. I think a lot of people with like headlamps slash just like so tired, your depth perception gets thrown off a little bit. And like in the golden hour last year, the amount of people who headbutted the rock was higher than I thought it would be. So okay, Finn, maybe you're onto something. Maybe fist bumping the rock is you know, the Silverton Emergency Dental Office is in business because of this Hardrock kiss.
Okay. I guess the last question that I want to cover, and then we can do final thoughts, is clockwise or counterclockwise harder, and why? I guess another way to think about this is like how much of the race dynamics are changed based on the change in direction. Like do certain runners fare better, fare worse? Like for example, this field, does anything change about this field if we're going, counterclockwise instead of clockwise this year? Any thoughts from either of you? I have some thoughts.
So for those who are listening, like this year was counterclockwise, which is you go up all the steeper sides of the climbs and then down all the less steep sides.
Climb the walls,
they say you
the
climb the walls, descend the ramps. I think this way suited Ludo better. Because he's such a powerful climber, and like a lot of like the history of this course has been like you don't win this race on the climbs, you win it on the descents. But just like watching him power hike, I was like, I just don't know if he's going the other way up some things that you have to run some parts, if that's going to be to his advantage. As good of a technical descender as he is, it just seemed like he was so unshakable on all the climbs. Courtney's won it both ways, so I don't know if it makes a difference for her. What direction would you want to run?
Me?
Either
this year. I mean, I want to climb the walls, descend the ramps. Not that I'm a good runner, but like I struggle with technical descending. I want like a more luxurious, I want to be descending off Oscar's Pass into Telluride. I want to be doing that long descent on Camp Bird into Ouray. That like really smooth road from like, I think is it Burroughs to Sherman. I don't know if I got that totally correct, but like this, for my preference, like this direction from this past year counterclockwise is preferable. But I guess it depends on the athlete.
Yeah, I will say AJW did a nice write-up on iRunFar last week comparing and contrasting the two, which I thought was helpful considering I was not terribly familiar with the course itself going into it. I do think the way they went this year sounds more enjoyable. I think from like a competition standpoint, I might perform better in the opposite direction, in the counterclockwise direction. Yeah, because I like to run. I like to run like douche grade uphill. And I think that would, but honestly, from the few runs I did out in the San Juans this past weekend, everything is hard. Like even we were doing the climb from Ouray up to Engineer yesterday, and you're climbing like on average 600, 700 feet a mile, which in Salt Lake at, when we're at like 7,000 feet here climbing, you can run all of that. Like I can run all of that. But out there at like 10, 11,000 feet, you want to be running all of that, but you just can't. So that part I think would get mentally trying after a while.
Yeah, I think counterclockwise, at least on paper, it's funny how the course records are getting closer and closer together. But like to me, this way should be the faster way.
Yes.
Where you just like get the steep stuff, you climb the steep stuff, it kind of neutrals out for most people, and then it's like who can just keep descending at like 7-minute pace over and over and over again. I think like my fastest way to go do this loop would be counterclockwise, but I think my highest percent chance of finishing the race is actually going clockwise. Because I say like I'm never going to do Hardrock fast. Like that's just not my thing. I live at 2,000 feet. So now I'm thinking, like, what gives me the best chance of finishing? And I think it's going clockwise because I don't go into full like red alert oxygen debt on every single climb. Like, even though it's like more mellow clockwise, I'm going to be hiking most of it anyway. So if I can at least hike it and not be at like full threshold heart rate, and then just hope that I can survive all the steeper, more technical descents, I think that's given me my best chance to finish the race.
Okay. Right on. Well, this has been awesome, guys. Let's roll into final thoughts. I've got 2 to share. The first one, I just want to give a special shout out to Jason Schlarb getting on the podium here this year, 8 years on after, what do you call it, co-winning the race with Killian back in 2016. If we ever have like a historical segment on the show one day, talking like men's and women's American all decades teams, he definitely belongs, at least in the conversation from the 2010s, like ripping it at Run Rabbit Run a few years, Hardrock, 4th UTMB. Like, cool to see him like in his mid 40s, still got it, coming off surgery. It was super inspiring to kind of see his positive attitude feeding off crew, the fans, etc., all through the race. And then my second final thought is, alternatives in the area. I'm a Hardrock fan. Like, after having been there for 2 years, I'm a Hardrock fan. But if you're itching to run kind of in that area or in a similar setting, everyone knows the High Lonesome 100, also a great race. But I recently came, and they're not paying me to say this, I just genuinely was like on the internet looking up alternatives, telling you guys offline. There's a new race called the San Juan Softy, which it's this one big 100-mile loop course starting from the Purgatory Ski Resort, halfway between Durango and Silverton. 100 miles of running, basically in the San Juans. A little bit less climbing, like 24,000 feet. But just from the pictures I saw, the GPX file, you get your fill. And there's only 40 people signed up for it for this year's edition next month. So if you're like,
is this the inaugural year?
Yes, I think that they were
it's
trying
brand
to
new.
do it last year, and there was a little bit of a permitting issue about the start finish, and they got that squared away. I think the ski resort or whatever agreed to it, but the course looks amazing. I think if it's marketed correctly and certain people go in, like, it could blow up, but it's a month after Hardrock. It looks sick. So I think Durango Running Company actually puts it on. So and that guy was at the race this year, I think, helping administer. So
you're buying San Juan Softy stock.
Yeah, it looks sick. So those are my 2 final thoughts. Leah, anything you want to say before we go?
A couple of things. I wanted to shout out Becky Bates. Becky Bates was the oldest woman finisher in the field, 62 years old, 7th place in an incredible time of, I think this might have been a PR for her. I think, just over 36 hours. So maybe not a PR, but incredible. There's nothing I want to be doing more when I'm 62 than lapping the San Juans. So complete inspiration. And then there was another runner who I believe was the final finisher in the race. I think it was Costa Alamonis. He came into Sherman, which I think is the second to last cutoff of aid stations, within minutes of that cutoff. And I think sometimes when you're pushing the back of the pack, pushing those cutoffs, you probably just feel like you're chasing them all day long, and like there's no break, and you probably feel like you might not make the cutoff at the final checkpoint, which is the finish. And he held strong and ended up getting a finish by less than 3 minutes. So I think that's really cool to see that even when you're just a few minutes under a cutoff with, hours and hours and hours to go, you can still push through and sneak there under the 48 hours.
Wow.
So impressive.
That's a great one. Both great ones.
Yeah, that is a good one. I will be bringing the whole family to Silverton next year. I'm not missing Hardrock again.
Book it right here.
Yeah, we're taking a family vacay to Silverton for Hardrock. That's we're stamping that one. Touch blue, make it true.
Awesome. Well, Brett, Leah, thank you so much. Excited for the next one we do. I don't know if it's going to be UTMB or Javelina, but always great connecting, and thanks so much.